I am a former Army interrogator, human intelligence collector. I was trained by the United States government to analyze your language, body language, posture to identify deception. I did it in the real world through interrogations, through source operations, and through strategic debriefings. I've got tons of certifications. I'm an expert at this.
You guys get ready to leave out of there, getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. That is critically important information. Right here, he's talking about when his buddy Bart pulls out his buddy Wyatt's boat. So Bart is on one boat and he's pulling out Wyatt's boat. Wyatt's boat is the one that you've heard about was taken on water and sinking, and that's why they had to leave Horn Island. I want you to pay attention to this.
To where we're out of all this, all this chaos, because we left at 4:30 and there was still.
We left at 4:30. We left at 4:30. This guy just said that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. Very specific time. Now, how did he know it was 3 o'clock? Brandon Tatum didn't ask him that. If this was an interrogation, that's a key question I would ask. How do you know it was 3 o'clock?
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie. Katie.
That's Katie McCormick that he's talking about. Katie McCormick said that's not true, but let's listen. This is at 3 o'clock. This happened at 3 o'clock.
And Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving,
when we were leaving, so it would be 4:30, because he's already said we were leaving at 4:30.
Nolan was sitting by the boat.
Nolan was sitting by the boat. How do you know, Warren, that Nolan was sitting by the boat? The last time you laid eyes on him was at 3 o'clock. It's now 4:30. This is your timeline. Timeline is everything. At this part of the story, he's at 4:30. But he just said less than a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and
how do you know that? The last time you laid eyes, your exact words, on him was 3 o'clock. You're now talking about 4:30. Now listen what happens next.
My buddy yelled for Nolan. Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving.
Now, in the interest of honest analysis here, if they were both on the boat and he heard his buddy yelling at Nolan, not him, by the way. Warren wasn't yelling at Nolan. Even in his own story, he wasn't looking for Nolan or yelling for Nolan. And in the beginning of part 1 of the interview, he says, Nolan was like a brother to me. He was my best friend. More than a friend, though. He was like a brother to me. But Warren's not the one looking for Nolan, not the one yelling for Nolan. He don't even go over and lay eyes on him again, according to his own story that he's telling us. But he hears his buddy saying, hey, Nolan.
The boat's having issues. And no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear. It's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on.
So your buddy asked Nolan multiple times and you never did. Your brother, your best friend. But notice he didn't say Nolan said, I'm going to stay here with Katie who I'm sitting with next to the boat. No part of that exchange would have given Warren the details to know that Nolan was sitting by the boat with Katie, which was his exact words. He contradicted himself. That's blatant deception. It needs to be
Nolan Wells update. The mistake Warren made during his interview with Brandon Tatum. Not an allegation, not an interpretation. A mistake caught on camera. In his own words, that he cannot walk back. Here is what happened. July 4th, Horn Island, Mississippi. 18-year-old Nolan Wells goes out to that island with a group of friends. He does not come back with them. 2 days later, his body is pulled from the water. His friend Warren, one of the people who was on that island, sits down with media personality Brandon Tatum and tells the world exactly what he says happened. That interview was supposed to be the end of the conversation. Instead, Warren's own words opened a door that nobody in that friend group can close anymore. Warren's own words are still sitting on camera, and they don't match. Okay? Before we get into it, you need to understand what this interview actually was, because that context changes everything about what Warren chose to do. Warren sat down voluntarily. No subpoena, no court order, no legal obligation of any kind. He chose to be there. And the person across from him, Brandon Tatum, is a media personality with a large platform. He is not a detective. He is not a prosecutor. He has no authority to compel a straight answer. This interview was not designed to stress test a timeline. It was designed to give Warren and his friends a public space to tell their side of the story, to explain what happened on Horn Island, to clear their names in the court of public opinion. Now, a former United States Army interrogator reviewed this interview publicly, trained by the U.S. government to analyze language, body language, and posture to identify deception. Not a theory guy, not an online analyst. Real-world experience, real interrogations, real source operations, real strategic debriefings. And here is what that kind of training teaches you to look for the moment someone sits down to tell their story. Warren walked into that interview with one goal: walk out looking like a grieving friend. What he walked out with was something else entirely. Now, take a look at this. Brandon Tatum asks Warren directly, "Where was Nolan as your group was getting ready to leave?" Simple question. Straightforward. Warren's answer is immediate. No hesitation. No searching. No let me think about that. He just says it. "The last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. Not around 3. Not sometime that afternoon. Not I think it was maybe mid-afternoon. 3 o'clock. Hard number. Specific time. Zero hesitation." Now here is what statement analysis tells us about that. When someone gives you a precise, unprompted time in a casual conversational setting like this interview, they are not guessing. Genuine memory under stress, especially after a chaotic day, produces approximate recall. It was around 3, sometime in the early afternoon, maybe 3:30. That is how real memory works. What it does not produce is a hard, specific timestamp stated instantly without a single moment of reflection. That kind of precision in that kind of setting tells a trained interviewer one specific thing. This person is not remembering. This person is telling you exactly what they decided you should believe. 3 o'clock. He said it without flinching. Hold on to that number, because 60 seconds later his own story forgets it. Stay with me, because this is where it moves. Warren keeps talking. He shifts to the moment the group actually leaves the island. 4:30 p.m., 90 minutes after the last time he says he laid eyes on Nolan. And here is what Warren says about that moment. Nolan was sitting by the boat. He does not say, "I heard Nolan was by the boat." He does not say, "Someone told me Nolan was there." He describes it. He describes Nolan's position. He describes the girl sitting next to him. He describes Nolan's face, shaking his head, laughing. He describes his buddy calling out Nolan's name over and over. "Nolan, get on the boat, we're leaving. Get on the boat." He says his buddy asked Nolan multiple times. Not once. Multiple times. All of this supposedly happening at 4:30. Now here is what forensic statement analysis flags in a moment like this one. Genuine recall, especially from a chaotic, emotionally charged day, produces impressions, general shapes of what happened. It does not produce sharp, specific visual detail about a moment the witness already told you they were not present for. Warren described a face. He described a position. He described exact words spoken multiple times, from a moment he already told us 60 seconds earlier he had not seen. Sharp visual detail. Exact words. Specific position. From a moment he already said he wasn't there for. That is not a memory. That is a problem. Okay, here it is. Both statements side by side right now. Statement 1. Warren's exact words spoken early in the interview. "The last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. Statement 2. Warren's exact words minutes later. Same interview. Same camera. Nolan was sitting by the boat at 4:30. Those two statements cannot both be true. Not in the same story, not from the same person, not at the same time. There are only two possibilities. Either Warren saw Nolan at 3 o'clock and genuinely does not know where Nolan was at 4:30, which means every detail he just described about 4:30, the face, the position, the girl, the exact words, came from somewhere other than his own eyes. Or Warren did see Nolan at 4:30, and the 3 o'clock statement needs a very different explanation. There is no version where both hold up. A trained interrogator watching this interview said it directly. This is a blatant contradiction. It needed to be immediately exploited. Meaning stop the interview right there. Ask Warren to reconcile both statements out loud on camera at the same time. That moment never happened. Warren moved forward. Tatum moved forward. The interview moved forward. And the contradiction was left sitting on the table for the rest of the internet to find later. Which is exactly what happened. Brandon Tatum didn't catch it. But the cameras did. And the people who actually have authority in this case, they have seen it too. There is one more detail from that same interview that nobody is talking about enough. And it does not involve a timeline. It involves what Warren said about Nolan before any of the departure story ever came up. His exact words. Not a paraphrase. He was like a brother to me. More than a friend. He was like a brother to me. Okay. So according to Warren, this is his brother. His closest person. The boat is having problems. The group is leaving. It is 4:30 on July 4th. And according to Warren's own account of that moment, he never once called out for Nolan, never walked over, never personally looked him in the eye and confirmed his so-called brother had a safe way back. In his own telling, it was his buddy doing the yelling, not Warren. Warren, by his own account, was a passive observer of his closest friend's final moments on that island. Is that a crime? Number. People make different choices under pressure. That is real. But it is a detail that sits uncomfortably next to everything else Warren said in that room. And it is a detail that a grand jury will not overlook. That interview was supposed to be the end of this story. Warren's side. On camera. Publicly stated. That is not what happened. Because sitting underneath that interview is a phone that went quiet on July 4th. An audio recording pulled from an official state agency with voices nobody was supposed to hear. And a forensic inspection agreed to by both sides that legal analysts say only appears in cases already moving towards something serious. Each one on its own raises questions. All three together point in the same direction. What we just broke down took days of sourcing, frame-by-frame review, and cross-referencing against confirmed documents from the agencies actually working this case. Chapter 2 goes deeper. The audio recording that came directly from a Mississippi state agency and what an audio engineer says she found inside it. The phone recovered from a friend's home and why the content from July 4th was not there when it should have been. And the joint forensic inspection agreed to by both the family and the state that tells you exactly how serious this investigation has become. If you want that the moment it drops, not 3 days late buried in your feed, subscribe to Detective Crime How right now. It costs nothing. 2 seconds. Now this is what the interview couldn't hide. Warren is not the only person who was present for that final conversation on Horn Island. Katie McCormack was there. She was with Nolan during that entire 90-minute window between 3 o'clock and 4:30. And Nolan's family released a public statement about what Katie told them. According to that statement, Nolan told Katie he was heading back to the boat. Back to his group. Katie assumed his friends would not leave without him. Now compare that directly to what the friend group says. Their account is that Nolan chose to stay, that he told them he was riding back with someone else, that he refused multiple times to get on the boat. 2 people, both physically present, same short conversation, completely opposite descriptions. This is not a question of memory fading over time. This is not 2 people remembering different details of the same event. This is a factual conflict. One of those accounts says Nolan was going back to his group. The other says he chose to stay behind. Both cannot be true. And somewhere between those 2 versions is the last thing Nolan Wells ever said. One of those accounts is wrong. and the investigators working this case know exactly which questions to ask to find out which one. Now let's talk about the audio, because this is where the physical evidence enters the case. On July 4th, while that boat was taking on water, a distress call was placed. A routine Coast Guard emergency call. The kind placed hundreds of times every summer on that water. Nothing unusual about the call itself, but an audio engineer named Janetta Brantley pulled that recording into Logic Pro X, industry standard software, used in professional audio production and forensic analysis. She separated the left channel from the right channel. That is a standard technique for isolating voices on a dual mono recording. It separates the call end from the dispatch end. And when she isolated those channels, what she says she heard underneath the call were voices, barely audible at first, then louder once isolated. She says she heard the words, "Damn it, Bart, Nolan's really dead now. Check his chest, is he dead?" Now before we move forward, let's be precise about what that is and what it is not. Those are not court-confirmed transcriptions. They have not been verified by a court-appointed forensic expert. Not yet. But here is what has been confirmed. The recording Brantley analyzed came directly from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, an official state agency, not a social media clip, not an anonymous upload, not something pulled from a random online source. It came from the agency that received the original distress call. That matters, because it changes the weight of everything attached to it. Now, the defense argument that has circulated is this. Could the audio have been altered? Could it be AI generated? Here is the problem with that argument. If the audio was altered before Brantley ever touched it, someone had to alter it. And the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources is where that audio came from. You cannot throw the word doctored into a room without naming who did the doctoring. Nobody making that argument has named a single person. That argument has a ceiling, and it hits it fast. Nobody making the doctored argument has named a single person responsible for the doctoring. And in a case being reviewed by a grand jury, that silence has consequences. Now let's talk about the phone. When Nolan went missing, his phone was not with him. It stayed on the boat. His family tracked it using the Life 360 app. They recovered it from a friend's home. His mother, Christine, and her sister went straight to Snapchat. Zero content from July 4th. Nothing saved, nothing visible. Christine has stated publicly that Nolan documented everything. Every gathering, every outing, every moment with friends, that was consistent with who he was. And here is the detail that makes the absence harder to explain away. The family checked that phone inside the standard 24-hour Snapchat window. Content posted on July 4th should still have been visible. It was not. Now let's be fair here. Cell service on Horn Island is unreliable. Content can fail to sync. Snapchat can glitch. Those are real technical possibilities, but they sit alongside a question that has not been answered. And that unanswered question is exactly why both sides agreed to what came next. A mutual simultaneous forensic phone inspection. Agreed to by both the family and the state. Family forensic experts and state investigators examining the same device, pulling the same data at the same time. A mutual forensic phone inspection agreed to by both the family and the state. Legal analysts said it plainly. This level of transparency only appears in cases already moving towards something serious. What we just laid out, the audio from a state agency, the missing phone content, the joint forensic inspection, this is not speculation. This is confirmed investigative activity on an active case. The autopsy results, the phone inspection findings, and the grand jury decision are all coming. When they drop, Detective Crime How will be the channel that breaks them down the right way. With sources, with forensic context, without the noise. Subscribe right now. Because when this case moves, and it will move, you need to already be here. Now, before we go any further, we need to stop and correct the record, because two pieces of false evidence spread to hundreds of thousands of people in this case, and leaving them uncorrected does real damage to a real investigation. The first is a photo. A picture of Nolan in a swimming pool circulated online with a claim that he made it off Horn Island alive. That claim spread fast. It was wrong. Rolling Stone investigated the photo's metadata. The image was taken on June 27th, 8 days before July 4th. at a separate party in Pass Christian, Mississippi. That photo is not evidence of anything connected to what happened on that island. The second is a video. A clip circulated online capturing what sounded like a confrontation over a phone. A voice saying, "Give me my phone. What are you doing?" Attorney Ben Crump referenced it publicly. He said he believed the voice was Nolan's. It was not. A friend named Track Shepard came forward directly to ABC News and confirmed the voice on that recording was his own. A separate altercation completely unrelated to Nolan. Ben Crump has since publicly acknowledged the conflicting accounts. We are telling you this directly because this channel does not traffic in viral content that has not been verified. Getting it right for Nolan means correcting the record even when the correction is less dramatic than the original claim. Every false claim that spreads in a case like this one makes the real evidence harder to see. We are not going to let that happen here. Now here is a piece of evidence that does not come from audio or a phone or a photo. It comes from a person. On the record. Twice. Javon Williams was Nolan's closest friend. He gave an on-record statement to two separate news organizations independently, the Biloxi Sun-Herald and CNN. He did not contradict himself between either telling. What he said was this: "I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. If he rode with you, he came back with you. Every single time. That is not a grieving friend defending someone's memory. That is a documented, independently confirmed, lifelong behavioral pattern stated on record twice by the same person without variation. And here is why that matters to investigators. Behavioral baseline analysis is a real investigative tool. When investigators evaluate conflicting witness accounts, they look at documented patterns of behavior, what a person consistently did, how they consistently acted, who they consistently were. And Javon Williams just gave investigators a baseline on Nolan that runs directly against the friend group's core account. That Nolan chose for the first time in his life to break that pattern on July 4th. Investigators don't just look at what happened. They look at whether what someone is claiming fits everything they know about who that person was. In Nolan's case, it doesn't. So where does this investigation actually stand right now? Let's be exact. No speculation. Only what has been confirmed. GPS data places the boat's departure at 4:31 p.m. The distress call audio came from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, a confirmed official state source. Nolan's body was recovered July 6th and identified through dental records. The district attorney's office has confirmed the case will be presented to a grand jury. The joint forensic phone inspection has been agreed to by both sides. FBI involvement is confirmed. Horn Island sits on federal land. Federal digital forensics tools are being used on phone data, audio, and video connected to this case. 60 witness interviews already conducted. 50 to 100 tips coming in every single day. Now here is what is disputed. Whether Nolan chose to stay on the island or believed he was returning to the boat. Whether the audio contains what listeners claim it contains. Whether Warren's contradiction is a memory error under stress or something investigators need to press further. And here is what remains unknown. The official cause and manner of Nolan's death. Whether content was deliberately removed from his phone. Whether the grand jury results in an indictment against anyone for anything. Whether Warren's formal law enforcement interview, separate from the Tatum interview, has resolved the contradiction or deepened it. Anyone telling you with total certainty that they know what happened to Nolan Wells is telling you more than the evidence currently supports. What the evidence does support is that this case is not finished. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. 2 nights before he died, he cooked salmon for his parents. He had a roster spot waiting, a full season ahead of him. And one rule his parents gave him that he had never broken a single time in his life. Come back with who you came with. The grand jury is waiting. The phone is being examined. The audio is in the hands of forensic experts. And Warren's words are still sitting there on camera, waiting for someone with the authority to ask the follow-up question that Brandon Tatum never did. This case is not closed. It is not even close to closed. The autopsy. The phone inspection results. The grand jury decision. 3 pieces of evidence that will define what happens next in this case. When they land, Detective Crime How will be the only place breaking them down with full forensic context, confirmed sourcing, and no noise. Subscribe right now. Not for more videos. for this case specifically, because the next chapter of Nolan Wells is already in motion, and when it breaks, you need to already be sitting in this chair.